Okay. Good morning.
Morning.
Morning, Brian. How are you?
Okay.
I don't think we'll learn tomorrow. It's Erev Tisha B'Av, and I don't think so. And then we'll see exactly what will happen over the Bein Hazmanim, Bein Hazmanim till Elul. We'll let you know. We'll let you know, Bezrat Hashem. I don't know what your plans are in general, for after Tisha B'Av. So Bezrat Hashem will have a Chag. But so today I'm going to learn something to you with again from the Sifsei Chaim discussing the idea of Tisha B'Av, and then as I said tomorrow we won't be learning as it's Erev Tisha B'Av here already. I mean that's an idea we need to think about in general. In other words, that someone is if someone is obligated to refrain from learning, there's a reason behind it. The reason behind not learning on Erev on Tisha B'Av, Erev Tisha B'Av. Again, whether or not you learn on Erev Tisha B'Av is a discussion. The Ramah brings that down. Others hold that it's a stricture which can cause problems. So in other words, if you're not going to learn, so then you might get involved in some petty things. So that's certainly not advisable. As if someone is going to, by not learning, he's going to get involved in things which are petty. So then you're much better off learning. That's for sure. So, but as I said, in general, public shiur, unless it would be on Tisha B'Av, I'll see. But Pashtus is I won't. So today the piece discusses, like I mentioned, that if someone doesn't learn, it's because the idea is we need to focus in on the facet of mourning. We don't want to take our minds off of the aveilus that we're supposed to be thinking about. And if someone's going to get involved in learning and in other things, it takes your mind off of that. And that became such a crucial thing that Chazal didn't allow us to learn on Tisha B'Av, except things that are connected to mourning. So our mind shouldn't wander at all. So that's certainly something to keep in mind during Tisha B'Av, not to, when you get tired or, from the fast and whenever it may be, it's not the time to start, doing other things. You're taking away from the whole focus of the day. The focus of the day is to think about the loss that we're living through, that we're experiencing. And even if I can't learn or other things, but that's not a reason for me to start digressing into getting involved in, projects that I would do because I'm not eating that, I'm not doing other things. So let me get involved in household projects or something. That is, undermining the whole idea of what Tisha B'Av is. Besides being a fast day, again, it has that added facet to it that it's a day of mourning. So we should, try to keep that in mind. So he quotes over here, the Sifsei Chaim quotes a very famous Yerushalmi that's we're all familiar with. It says, Kol dor shelo nivne beis hamikdash biyamav, any generation that did not witness the rebuilding of the Beis Hamikdash in its day, Kilu nechrav biyamav. One must look at it as if it's been destroyed in that person's day. In other words, if the Beis Hamikdash has not been rebuilt, so then it's a reflection that the reasons for its destruction are still prevalent and it's still there with us. Because if it wouldn't be, then we would have gotten back to Beis Hamikdash. So that's what the Yerushalmi in Maseches Yuma. So he continues, Chazal hitilo es achrayes achurban. Chazal placed the obligation of the churban al kol dor. Now, we shouldn't just look at it, well, it happened 1970 some odd years, 1950 years ago, and what does it have to do with me? So that's not correct at all. We see Chazal telling us that if the Beis Hamikdash is not being built, we are culpable. I'll call dor shelo nivde Beis Hamikdash b'yamav shim haya zocha, because if we would be privileged, l'taken es hasibos, to correct, if we would have been able to correct the causes, that caused the Churban, Vadai Hayazoch, we would have been Zocha to see its rebuilding. So the question that's asked, he says, Nishelet Hashela. So then the question that we need to ask ourselves is, Im Doros Harishonim Lo Omdu B'Nisayon. If the earlier generations were not able to stand up to such a test, V'Gormu Al Yedei Ma'aseihem, and they caused through their actions, L'Churban Habayis, V'Hadoros Haboyim Achareim, and of the generations that came subsequently, the Tanoim and the Amoroi. In other words, if we just think about the generation of the Churban Beis Hamikdash, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, the giants of Torah Shabbal Peh, if they're the ones that were the ones who were alive during the Churban, and they weren't able to save the Beis Hamikdash, right? Vadai Hayuzoch, I'm sorry, if they couldn't do it, the Tanoim and the Amrim Lo Zochel Livnosim Kain Mahat Tzviya Al Doreinu. Where do we fit in? How can we possibly stand up to anything if they weren't able to do it? Kilu Nech, and what's happening? How could they possibly be successful? Dor Shel Avodas Hashem B'Chitzonios, where their connection to Hashem was so much greater and so much more intense and so much more real than our connection with Hashem, which is a superficial one. How is it? Where do we stand a chance to correct those blemishes? That as a result of them, nigram churban habayis al yedei doros harishonim. If those issues were so essential that they caused the Churban Beis Hamikdash and the Tanoim and the Amoroim and the Rishonim and all the giants in Jewish history weren't able to do that, where do we come anywhere close to it? Dor shel avodas Hashem mitoch pnimius. Right? They had it. So that's question number one that he poses. And to go even further back, he says, Odem Harishon kodem achet. Adam Harishon, before he sinned, Hayagufo v'nishmaso mizukakim. Adam Harishon, before he sinned, was the epitome of perfection, as perfect as any creation could be. That was Adam Harishon. No one comes close to perfection any more so than Adam Harishon. Adam Hayamautar, he was crowned. Umukhtar ba'atoros kedusha v'yikarav ma'od. Ulam, however, la'achar shenichshal b'chet, after Adam Harishon sinned, gorish mi Gan Eden, he was sent from Gan Eden, el olam hachurmius, to a world of physical. Va'amnam kishachota lo dai shelo hirviach ma shehaya yochel harviach. Knows with the sin of Adam Harishon, not only didn't he gain what he could have had, he lost what he had. He became a human being, a lowly human being, like we are now. Again, he's quoting the Das Tfunos from Moshe Chaim Mitzato. He was now given a new mission statement. Avodas Hashem mitoch nisyonos shel Hester. When Adam Harishon, before he sinned, was purely spiritual and his mission was a spiritual one, now he's saying that after the sin, Adam Harishon now was given a new mission to serve Hashem with tests in a way where the obviousness of Hashem is hidden now. We're living in a world of nature, cause and effect, which we call b'zeyas apecha tocha lechem. In other words, you eat with work, meaning, what does that mean? You're eating with work. Man sees as if to say, because I did this, therefore I got my bread. I planted the seed and I worked on the tree, etc., etc. That's how I got it. We're living in a world of nature, and that's the test. To see Hashem, even though it's hidden, to see that that's all Hashem really. The kosher. So he asks now, Im Adam Harishon b'madrigoso hagavoa. If Adam Harishon on his level, when he was close to Hashem before the sin, if Adam Harishon was on such a spiritual level, Lo hitzliach lamod b'nisayin, if he wasn't able to withstand the test, heich you talking. So then again, how is it possible? Shala'achar nefilah. So after he's now on a much lower level, he's been demoted spiritually. How is it possible for him to be matzliach lama b'nisayin? If someone who's in a much better position, seemingly, was not able to withstand the test, how is it possible now Adam Harishon in a much less opportune situation to withstand the tests of Hester Ponim, where you see Hashem directly in your life? Adam Harishon wasn't able to withstand the test. How is it possible now with Adam Harishon on a demoted level spiritually to withstand the test where you don't even see Hashem in the open anymore? So he's asking this question again, from a different perspective. From number one, from our perspective about the Churban Beis Hamikdash, how could we possibly withstand the test that the Tanoim and the Amoraim weren't successful in? And then with Adam Harishon, how is it possible? Now he asks the last question, I think he says over here. There's another question Reb Chaim Friedlander asks. Im Doros Rishona lo omda b'nisayon. Again, if we see that the earlier generations were not able to withstand the test, and that which brought the Churban, and therefore they were demoted spiritually. We're living now in this exile where everything is hidden. How can we be successful? The takein, to correct these blemishes, and these mistakes. If we're living in Golus where everything is dark and black and we can't see anything, how can we possibly correct something that those who had a much greater sensitivity to weren't able to? Golus wasn't enough. Golus became a greater test. If we couldn't live by the first test, sending us into Golus, where the connection to Hashem is so much more difficult, that's making things is compounding the problem. V'yaseir, even more than this. Hari Aveira Goreres Aveira, we see that one sin brings on another sin. Achari Sha'odim Nichshal Ba'aveira, if a person sins and he falls from his spiritual level, Hariyata Oluhu Shuv Lipol B'Madrega Nosefes, he's more susceptible to going even further down. How could anyone ever come back to Tikkun? So he's asking a very, very broad question which needs to be understood. And he says, Chazal Tiyaru, he quotes a Gemara over here in Sota. He says, Chazal Tiyaru as Shiflos. Chazal described for us in a very demonstrative way the lowness, the hachutzpah, the brazenness, Shia Bedor Ikfas of the Mashiach, that's going to be so pronounced in the generation of Mashiach. Ha'emes ti'anaderes, truth is going to be missing. Na'orim pnei zakenim yalbinu, there'll be no respect for the earlier generations. Pnei hador pnei hakelev, and the Vilna Gaon explains ikvasa milosh. What does akev mean? From a heel. Kedugmas akabayim habenuyim besof komas odem. In other words, our heels, like we have on our foot. It's all the way on the bottom, and which has no sensitivity. If you notice, right on your heel, it's all callous and everything because you have no sensitivity there. It says kach doros hahochem umiskatnim. He says so too the generations are going smaller and smaller in ruchnias and spirituality. Lumos doros harishonim. The gamzo storach bios, we need to have an explanation of that. In doros misdardarim, if we see that things are going in a downward slope, hashiflus v'achutzpah goveres, and the brazenness is becoming more intense. Madua dafka doros elu zocham. How will it be that we're going to get the Mashiach more so than the earlier generations? Okay. So he brings down over here, Kedei lahaven es havdel. Now those are the questions, very, very important and serious questions that need to be understood. Says Kedei lahavin es a hevdil, to understand the difference between the earlier generations and the later generations, and how is it possible that the later generations are going to be zocha to this correction? Vesmahuso, and the essence of the generation of Mashiach, he's going to start giving us the idea over here. Okay, so he says like this. It says, Bereshis dvareinu sha'alnu, at the outset of our questions, we discussed, Im Adam Harishon lo hitzliach, if Adam Harishon was not successful, Lamod kodem chet eitz hadas, before the sin of the eitz hadas, b'madrigo, so on his level of ruchnius, which was the epitome of perfection, Im kain, if that's the case, ma hoil, how is it going to be helpful? Girushu mi Gan Eden. In other words, by sending man out of Gan Eden, you are making things much more challenging to the darkness and to physicalness. Im doros harishenim lo amdu b'nisayun. Again, if the earlier generations were not able to withstand the test, heich doros achronim, how's it going to be that the later generations yatzlichu latakein mitoch choshkas hagolos, with all of our disadvantages that we have now? We said we don't have the base of Migdash. We're living in a Golas. How can we possibly correct that which was in that generation when they had everything? Hatshuvahi, here's the answer that he wants to give us. Kish Adam Harishon kodem achet, before Adam Harishon, before he sinned, haya b'madrega ruchaniyut gvoah, he was in a very, very high level spiritually. Azai, therefore, Gam kol ma'asav, therefore every action that he did, hamabat aleihem, the perspective, the scrutiny on them, ha'im bechina yoter gavoha. In other words, like we understand, Hashem holds people who are on a much higher level, just like, if a 2-year-old child would knock over something, so the parent would not be upset at all. The accountability of a 2-year-old child is, comparison to a 20-year-old child, it's different worlds. And therefore, what a 2-year-old can get away with, the 20-year-old child's not going to tell his parent, but my 2-year-old little baby brother, he did it and you didn't say anything, right? That would be that would be ridiculous for a 20-year-old to compare himself to a 2-year-old and say, well, if he did it, why can't I get away with it? So that's what he's pointing out over here, that Adam Harishon, before he sinned, or earlier generations, they were on a much, much greater level spiritually, and therefore every action that they did was under a much greater scrutiny. L'or zos, and because of that, gam hatzviya al ma'asav, therefore the accountability of what they did, hayas gadol yoter. So to a certain extent, in other words, we're being put in as 2-year-olds. Our understanding of things spiritually, etc., is on a much lower level, and therefore Hashem's expectations from us are on a different level than it was from the earlier generations. Ulam, however, he says, mipas shelo amad b'madrega v'ozeh, and because they weren't able to stand on that high level, kibel derech hadasha, therefore they were given a new mission statement. Yorad mi madrigo, so man went down a level to the choshech of Hester, of not seeing Hashem openly. Even if man could not withstand the test before he sinned on that high level, it's possible now, on a lower level, so he'll be able to do what? To correct that which he did from a different way. Because the expectation is not as great. That's number one. Nosef Lakach, in addition to that, Miyatayim Kol Gadlusa, with all of his greatness, Ein Hamabat Al Maisav B'chumra Kamo Kodem Achet. It's not that Hashem does not hold the accountability anymore. It says Kach, he says, so too Gam Klal Yisrael. The same thing has to be understood in consideration of the Jewish nation. Kodem Achet, before the Jews sinned, that before the sins of the Churban Beis Hamikdash, Haya b'madrega gavoa yoter, the generation of the Tanoim that lived before the Beis with the Beis Hamikdash, kishahai Beis Hamikdash haya b'mechitzosem, living with the Beis Hamikdash by definition obligated them on a much greater level. Just like we saw when you look in the Chumash, the same thing. HaKadosh Baruch Hu did not want the Shechina to be within the Jewish people after the Cheder Eikel. He said, because again, if that's going to be, then the accountability is going to be on a much, much greater level. Hashem said, if my Shechina is going to be Shora amongst the Jewish people, that means the accountability is going to be every movement that you make is going to be under scrutiny. And the question is, can you maintain such a thing? Can you imagine having like a security camera on you 24/7, and everything you do, someone's watching over you? If you had somebody following you every second of the day, at a certain point you go crazy because you want to have like time out. And really, there's no such thing as time out. But we live in a world where it looks that way. But they lived in a world where you didn't have that, and they were able to maintain it basically. So he says, when the Beis Hamikdash stood, Memela, as a result, Gam Hatzvi al Masem, therefore the accountability of what they did, was much greater. Ketikun, so what happened as a result of such a thing? Kiblu, they received a new way of serving Hashem with the Churban Beis Hamikdash, to serve Hashem even in the darkness. In other words, it's a new expectation from them. We're no longer on that level anymore, and therefore the expectations have changed. Right? And those Hashem doesn't hold us accountable on such a level anymore. It says, so too, as the generations move further and further away, as the golus becomes more and more dark and less is evident of Hashem, even though we're being lowered, and therefore how can we possibly do things? But he says you have to understand, like we understand. Gam hatzviya, the expectations of our actions have been lessened as well, and therefore what they couldn't have accomplished, we could very well accomplish, because as we have like you have in tests, you have what you call a bell curve, right? If someone gets a 60, so if the highest mark is 65, and the lowest mark is whatever 20, so you got a 60, that's like you got a 99. So even though it's a 60, but Hashem sees, but that's the best that can be expected. So that's considered enormous. So that's the idea over here, that we're living in a generation now where, if you look at the Jewish world, Rabbi Miller used to say this, if you look at the Jewish world, 200, 300 years ago, to say that you're a Shomer Shabbos Jew, that didn't really, okay, that's what, that's like everybody. That's like saying, I ate breakfast this morning. That's what everybody does. People would learn, people would all. Today, if you look at the Jewish world as a whole, a large percentage of the Jews, the majority of the Jews aren't even aware of Torah. They don't even know, and they have no reality whatsoever. They've gotten lost in the exile, not to their guilt, but that's just the reality. So any Jew who has any identification whatsoever is already in the top 10% of the Jewish world. So if we look at ourselves in that, if Hashem is looking at us from that perspective, what we're doing is accomplishing what the greats of earlier generations did, where we wouldn't have stood anywhere near anybody then, but because we're living in this generation now, where a vast majority of the Jews that aren't aware of anything from any Torah perspective, that we're aware of the Tisha, that we're aware that there's no Beis Hamikdash, is a small percentage of the Jewish people. So when Chazal tell us, Ein bein David Ba'el, but this continues over, Shekulo Zakai, Kulo Chayev, the extremes will be that either they'll be completely guilty or they'll be completely worthy, right? That's it. The Maharal explains over here that how's that happening? A very famous idea that the Mashiach, they quote the pasuk, if we're Zocha, will be coming with it from the Anonim, from Shemayim it'll come. Lo zoche. If we're not zoche, then the Mashiach is going to be like a poor person, an oni who's riding on a donkey. That is the depiction of what it's going to look like when Mashiach comes. Either he'll be coming down with the Anani HaKavod, or with the a donkey riding, the Mashiach, a poor person riding on the donkey. So the way the Maral explains that, he says the word chamor is a representation of chum, of physicalness. In other words, the generation that we're living in over here is everything has been demoted to just physicalness. It's not the tests of the earlier generation from an intellectual perspective. Everything has been demoted into physical. That's what people are just running after, their physical drives and everything over here. But that's what's going to be over here. The Mashiach over here. The tests of the earlier generations were so much more challenging. How was that? You had the Yetzer Hara of spiritual tests in the early, of idolatry, of philosophy, haskalah, meaning intellectual challenges to belief in Hashem. But in our generation, the Yetzer Hara is so much more simple. That's the idea of a chamor, meaning simpleness. Chumri is physicalness. That's what we're eating and drinking, because all people are thinking, what do I have? What will I have left if they don't take it in now? Tomorrow is the grave. So it's a generation that's completely running after its physical pleasures without any embarrassment whatsoever. So he's saying, Amnam dafka mitoch shiflusa shel hador zu. Specifically, because we're on the generation as a whole is so low, therefore, Shim Kol Zos, it's very possible, Yeshav Shorus, that's why we have the possibility that the Yeshua, the salvation, will come specifically in this generation. Because if we'll do any tshuva whatsoever, if we'll see any hope, we're going to want some spirituality in us, like a famous idea, a little bit of that light will push away an enormous amount of that darkness, because anything we do is considered enormous. In Bedoros Kodmim, if the earlier generations, they needed to fight an intense battle with the Yetzer Hara, our fight is on a different level, and therefore we have this possibility to be able to bring Mashiach in our generation. So he's Yatan Nov and Hativ. Now we can understand, he says over here, why is the accountability as well for us? Because Hashem, again, gives us we have a greater accountability. Why is that? We can fix that problem because it's much simpler for us. The challenges are much simpler. The earlier generation, the test was a much more difficult one. It was a more challenging one. But in our generation, the test is a physical one. Hayetzer Hara pashut, it's very open. To see the difference between what Torah and what the world is offering us. But Gaspiyotera, it's so unsophisticated is the word. Havsharasu biyadena, we have the possibility to become strong in Torah and Yirat Shamayim, to bring light into that darkness and into the physicalness. And throughout Be'ezrat Hashem will be zocha to build the Beis HaMikdash and the Bias HaMashiach. Amen. Okay, so that's the piece over here. Are there any questions? Okay, so as I said, tomorrow being Erev Tisha B'Av here in Eretz Yisrael, if I change my mind and that we have, I'll let you know, but as of now, we will not have tomorrow, and obviously Thursday not on Tisha B'Av. And what will happen during the Bein Hazmanim, we will send out a notice to let you know, Bezrat Hashem. Okay, but Mitzvah Hashem, we want the Torah to, we should be Zocha, Mitzvah Hashem, and we should have the full Nechama in Hey Rabbi Amen. Okay.
Amen. Thank you very much.
Okay, have a wonderful day, gentlemen, and Mitzvah Hashem should all hear Besoros Tovos.
Amen. Have a meaningful fast.
Amen, amen. Thank you. All the best. Take care.